All right. Well, good morning, and thank you all for inviting the National Transportation Safety Board to speak with your group today. My name is Leo Walton, and my colleague Stephanie Shaw is also presenting with me today. We are both safety advocates at the NTSB. And today, this presentation, we're going to provide some background on the NTSB, our investigative process, and share lessons learned from several recent investigations involving school buses that deal with these safety issues: distracted driving, occupant protection, physical and medical fitness, fire safety and evacuation, and pedestrian safety. You're likely familiar with the NTSB by seeing us on the news at the scene of transportation accidents and crashes. The NTSB is an independent federal agency charged with investigating accidents and crashes in all modes of transportation and making safety recommendations to prevent something similar from happening again in the future. Investigation reports and safety recommendations are presented to our politically appointed 5 board members for their consideration and adoption. It is important to note that the NTSB is not a regulatory agency. In other words, we cannot mandate the implementation of our safety recommendations. The safety recommendations we issue as a result of our investigations and studies are the NTSB's most important product. Once approved and adopted by the board, NTSB recommendations are issued to a wide variety of organizations, including federal and state agencies, companies, non-governmental organizations, and associations. They are issued to entities that can take action to address the safety issues identified through our investigations and research. While safety investigations are issued to, while safety and recommendations are issued to specific entities, we encourage anyone to implement the safety recommendations when possible to improve their safety practices. Before I get into specific investigations, I want to talk about our Highway Safety Office and the investigative process. The NTSB Office of Highway Safety is one of our smallest investigative offices with a staff of about 30 individuals. There are 3 teams of highway investigators that launch to identified crashes, which is about 21 crashes per year. When determining whether we will launch to a crash, we consider the following. Is there a high public interest, particularly? And typically with a school bus crash, it does have a high level of public interest, which is why we launch to these very frequently. School buses are the safest form of transportation on our roadways, but people can lose confidence in school transportation when there is a crash. And so we launch our teams to investigate what happened and issue safety recommendations that will hopefully restore the public confidence in the transportation system for students. During our crash investigations, unlike a police investigation, we are not looking at just the driver or the drivers involved and who is to blame. We take a holistic approach at what happened and issue safety recommendations to prevent it from happening again. We conduct a very rigorous safety investigation. We explore the human factors, the machine factors, and the environment factors. In human factors, we want to understand if the driver did anything that contributed to the crash. We need to know if they may have been talking on their cell phone, so we will pull the cell phone records and examine those closely. We look at anything that would affect the driver's performance or behavior, such as impairment or medical challenges that they might have. We explore driver records and if the hiring company had proper oversight for the driver. In the machine or the vehicle factors, we'll examine the vehicle to see if there were any mechanical factors. So a full vehicle inspection is conducted, as well as looking at maintenance records of the fleet owner or the school bus company. With environmental factors, we look at how the roads were designed, any weather factors that were present, any guardrails, etc. In addition to school bus crashes, we investigate crashes involving motor coaches, large trucks, rail grade crossings, and infrastructure disasters like the Minneapolis bridge collapse that took place in 2007, and more recently, the Florida bridge collapse that happened in 2018. Today, we'll speak to you about 3 recent school transportation crashes that we have investigated. We will outline what happened in the crash, why it happened, which will include the safety issues we had discovered, and the probable cause that was determined, as well as some safety recommendations that were issued as a result. Today, we will be focusing on crashes that occurred in Chattanooga, Tennessee, Oakland, Iowa, and Rochester, Indiana. On November 21st, 2016, at about 3:20 p.m., a 2008 Thomas-built 84-passenger school bus in Chattanooga, Tennessee, departed the roadway, collided with a utility pole. Following the collision, the bus overturned onto its right side and subsequently collided with a tree, which caused the roof of the bus to collapse inward. The school bus was occupied by the 24-year-old driver and 37 student passengers, was transporting the student home from Woodmore Elementary School. As a result of this crash, 6 student passengers died and 31 were injured. The bus driver received minor injuries. The safety issues that were uncovered in this investigation were speeding, distraction, occupant protection, driver oversight, and safety technology. The safety issues involved with the human factors were speeding and distraction. The bus was equipped with an onboard recorder technology, so investigators were able to see some of the drivers and students' behaviors prior to and during the crash. The posted speed limit on the road was 30 miles per hour. Although he was speeding, going 52 miles per hour, investigators determined that the bus driver could have remained in control of the bus. The failure of the bus driver to initially react with an appropriate steering input as the bus entered the right curve too fast resulted in the bus departing the roadway and the loss of control, followed by the left overcorrecting steering input, which led to the bus rollover and crash. The school bus driver's speeding combined with his use of a cell phone while driving led to the vehicle loss of control, run off the road, and rollover crash. In attempting to control student behavior, the bus driver had been operating the bus in a manner that caused passengers to fall out or be thrown from their seats, and his pre-crash steering behavior and speeding were consistent with these unsafe driving patterns. For the safety issue of occupant protection, this image shows the roof crush severity highlighted in orange, yellow, and red, and passenger injuries marked in red for fatalities, yellow for serious injuries, and green for minor injuries. The school bus passengers were at risk due to the pre-crash vehicle motions that threw them from their seating compartments prior to the bus striking the utility pole and during the rollover sequence, rendering compartmentalization ineffective. During the crash sequence, 4 students were thrown into the intrusion zone, 2 were fatally injured as a result of the crash, and 2 others were seriously injured. When the bus struck the utility pole and tree, 3 passengers seated in the front were ejected. During the pre-crash vehicle motions, many students were thrown from their seating compartments, rendering compartmentalization ineffective for the remainder of this crash sequence. Evaluating the injury risks and outcomes showed that passengers near the front were vulnerable to ejection, and everyone was vulnerable to secondary impacts, especially those who were on the high side and fell to the low side during the rollover. Also, passengers who fell to the middle of the passenger side were vulnerable to intrusion during the impact with a tree. The video evidence was crucial for understanding the outcomes. While the video did not show the exact post-crash location for each passenger, it clearly indicated that they were at risk of being thrown out of their seats. Overall, this showed a loss of benefits of compartmentalization even prior to impacts. It also showed that seatbelts would have retained the passengers in their seats and reduced injury risk. The school bus driver was hired in January 2016 and was provided an in-house commercial driver training from January to April 2016. The training included instruction on driving and defensive driving skills, braking, and student management. He completed the training and received approval to drive in May. He did not drive over the summer and began in the new school year on August 11th. On August 18th, he was in a crash when he struck a curb on the edge of a roadway and damaged the bus. He did not report the crash to his supervisor. On September 20th, he sideswiped another vehicle, causing property damage. Following each crash, Durham School District conducted a driver evaluation and retraining. He had also been counseled for several performance-related issues, being late for work and taking a bus home. The employee handbook enumerates serious safety violations that may result in termination on the first offense, which include failure to perform a proper child check and failure to report an accident or injury in a timely manner. The policy requires employees to immediately report an accident, injury, or incident to supervisors or managers. And employees are required to attend mandatory safety meetings and training, which he did not do. The NTSB has advocated for collision avoidance systems for commercial motor vehicles for more than 20 years. Although school buses offer the safest form of transportation to and from school, collision avoidance systems such as automatic emergency braking and electronic stability control offer large safety benefits in helping to prevent or mitigate the severity of crashes. The probable cause was determined to be the school bus driver's excessive speed and cell phone use, which led to the loss of the control of the vehicle. Durham School Services' failure to provide adequate bus driver oversight, allowing an inexperienced driver to operate a commercial vehicle with escalating risky driving behaviors that it knew or should have known could lead to the unsafe operation of the school bus, as well as the Department of Education's lack of follow-up to ensure that the school services had addressed a known safety issue for the driver. Contributing to the severity of the crash was the lack of passenger lap and shoulder belts on school buses. The recommendations in this crash were for driver oversight went to the school bus contractor. It involved poor driver oversight by motor carrier and school district. The school bus operator was a private for-hire motor carrier performing contracted student transportation service. Poor driver oversight by both the school district and the contracted motor carrier resulted in unsafe operation of the school bus. This crash also, we also issued recommendations to the states to upgrade their seatbelt requirement from lap belts to lap shoulder belts for all passenger seating positions, and enact legislation to require all new school buses be equipped with passenger lap shoulder belts for all passenger seating positions. I want to emphasize that school buses, again, are one of the safest modes of transportation when it comes to transporting students to and from school and school-related activities. But we know that there is some confusion around student safety on school buses with and without seatbelts. Through our investigations, we have found that compartmentalization works well protecting children in frontal and rear crashes. However, it is incomplete in side impact crashes and rollovers. The NTSB has a long history of investigating school bus crashes. Many have focused on buses with compartmentalization alone. The 6 crashes shown here all involve buses with seatbelts. 5 of the 6 school buses pictured here were equipped with lap-only belts, whereas the Anaheim crash was equipped with lap shoulder belts in a flexible seating system. From these crashes, we have learned that lap and shoulder belts may have reduced injuries or prevented fatalities. If you need a resource to share with your school districts about school bus safety, we developed a video that is available on the NTSB YouTube channel. In this video, we discuss the benefits of seatbelts and also showed simulations of our crashes we've investigated showing where seatbelts would have reduced injury severity in crashes. I will now turn it over to Stephanie Shaw to discuss more investigations. Stephanie?
Thanks, Leah. The first case I'd like to talk about occurred at about 6:50 a.m. on December 12th, 2017. A 74-year-old school bus driver stopped at a residence in Oakland, Iowa, and picked up a 16-year-old student. As he was backing out of the driveway, the rear wheels of the bus dropped into a 3-foot ditch located on the opposite side of the roadway. The driver attempted to drive the bus out of the ditch, which ignited a fire. The resulting fire killed both the driver and the student. The safety issues we identified in this investigation were related to driver physical and medical fitness, driver oversight, fire safety, and evacuation training. In this case, the bus driver held a valid DOT medical card. He had a history of back problems, and within the last few months leading up to the crash, his condition had deteriorated, resulting in his need to use a cane or a walker. The driver was scheduled to undergo back surgery 2 days after the crash, and the day of the crash was supposed to be his last day behind the wheel. Despite school officials being aware of the driver's physical condition and complaints of accidents caused by this driver, nothing was done. The requirement for drivers to complete a test that shows that they possess the minimum amount of physical agility necessary to perform the duties of a bus driver was removed by the school district by the previous director and had not been reinstated at the time of the start of this school year. Clearly, there is a difference between medical qualification and physical qualification of a driver. The school district allowed a driver with known significant mobility issues and who was unable to perform required safety duties to operate a school bus. Most of you have likely attended or seen a video of a school bus fire demonstration. The Oakland, Iowa fire illustrates that once a school bus compartment is breached, even when an exterior fire enters the bus, a fire spreads quickly and smoke, toxic gases, and heat make the interior untenable for occupancy. We determined that in this case, a fire suppression system in the engine compartment could have prevented the fire from spreading into the passenger's compartment. When we consider how quickly a school bus fire can spread through a bus, a look at the timeline of the Iowa incident emphasizes the importance of emergency evacuation training for both students and drivers. This table shows the timeline of the incident. The first call the driver made was to the bus maintenance facility via the bus's radio. He reported that he was stuck in a ditch and at his first pickup location and that there was a fire. The school bus driver's decision to use the radio to call the bus transportation supervisor instead of activating the 911 emergency button delayed notification to emergency responders. The first county sheriff's deputy arrive on the scene stated that the school bus was fully engulfed in the fire when he arrived on scene. The driver was found in the driver's seat and the passenger was found on the floor next to the driver's seat. Research has shown that under the stress of an evacuation, passengers don't always use the most appropriate exit. Passengers in emergency situations are less able to cope with new equipment and information if it's not intuitive or does not match their expectations. Their natural inclination is to leave by the exits they recognize, such as the loading door at the front of a bus. Training in school bus evacuation teaches students to use the front loading door as their first option in an emergency. Opening a manually operated door requires several steps and up to 25 pounds of force. A student who is not trained in the procedure might not be able to open the door in an emergency without the driver's assistance. Despite the front loading door being the often used first means of egress, students might not be trained in how to evacuate through a manually operated loading door when their driver or if their driver becomes incapacitated. In this case, post-crash fire examination showed that there was no obstructions to the front door. Student evacuation drills are an issue that has come up several times over the past few years in our investigations. By and large, most school districts conduct at least 2 evacuation drills a year. However, we found that in Iowa, being given the training was actually dependent on several variables. One was prior to the 2018 crash, high school students were allowed to age out of the requirement. The belief was that they had been exposed to it in previous years and no longer needed the training, but this didn't take into consideration students who had come out from outside the district and transferred in. Second, there was also evacuation drills provided to students who normally use the school's transportation service. Drills were not conducted with school buses for students who were using school buses that were transporting sports teams or parents and teachers on a school-sponsored trip. And also that evacuation drills were not provided, or rather the school districts tended to forgo the drills if the school district contracted transportation from another company, like as if when they were using a motor coach to transport students. In the Oakland investigation, We also found that each of the Riverside Community School District buses is equipped with an onboard radio immediately adjacent to the driver, and it's easily accessible. You can see it here in the red circle. The radio provides direct communication with the bus barn, but it is also equipped with a 911 button. When depressed, the button connects the driver directly to the sheriff's department's emergency 911 dispatcher. On the day of the crash, rather than using this button to reach emergency responders, the driver instead radioed the bus barn directly. This gave some individuals the erroneous belief that the driver's situation was not an imminent threat to life. And in fact, no one called 911 for 6 minutes. What we found also was that there was no standard training in the use of the radio. Some drivers were not trained or were unaware that the red emergency button even existed. For this crash, we determined that the probable cause of the incident was the driver's failure to control the bus, the failure of the school district to provide adequate oversight of the driver's physical fitness, and contributing to the severity of the fire was an incomplete firewall. As a result of this investigation, we issued several recommendations. We asked DOT to require in-service school buses to be equipped with fire suppression systems that at a minimum address engine fires. And we asked NTSB to require all new school buses to be equipped with this technology. We also asked NTSB to develop standards for newly manufactured school buses that would prevent hazardous quantities of gas or flame to pass through the firewall from the engine compartment to the passenger compartment. We asked manufacturers to install fire suppression systems that at a minimum address engine fires on all new buses as standard equipment. And we also reiterated a recommendation to NTSB to adopt flammability and smoke emission standards for school buses that are similar to what is required for commercial aviation and rail passenger transportation. We also issued a recommendation to several states, including Kentucky, to require that all drivers pass a physical performance test when they're hired and annually, and also whenever their condition would change and that they should be evaluated again for their physical fitness. We made additional recommendations to Iowa and school transportation associations that we think are applicable to Kentucky as well. It's just simply informing others that are involved in student transportation of the crash and our findings and recommendations, and then also to provide guidelines to drivers on how to present thorough evacuation training to students, requiring twice yearly documented school bus evacuation training and drills, including showing students how to operate a manually operated loading door, and to verify that training is available to all potential bus passengers, so students, teachers, other employees, substitute bus drivers and chaperones that might be on a school bus. Before I move into our investigation into the Rochester, Indiana crash, I wanted to just further emphasize the importance of evacuation and emergency training for students. These two crashes involved student transportation using motor coaches. In Oakland, California, on April 10th, 2014, a motor coach occupied by a driver and 46 passengers crashed. We determined that there was no pre-trip safety briefing provided to the passengers, and the lack of a pre-trip briefing, which would have covered emergency egress and the use of seatbelts, was found to be causal in the severity of the injuries in this crash. There were 10 fatalities, 3 from blunt force trauma, 6 from smoke inhalation, and 1 died of burns. One of the victims was thrown from her seat during the initial crash and died as a result of being trampled by the other passengers. Interviews with the surviving passengers revealed that many of the students didn't know how to get off the bus. And then several students also mentioned that they hesitated to climb out of the windows due to the height of the window from the ground. In Loxley, Alabama, on March 13th, 2018, a school-sponsored high school trip from Florida back to Texas. The bus was occupied by a driver and 46 passengers, which included 42 students, a teacher, and 3 chaperones. While driving, the driver suffered a medical emergency and became incapacitated. The motor coach crossed the center median and traveled for a distance before plunging into a ravine 50 feet below the interstate. The driver of the motor coach died and 15 passengers sustained serious injuries and 31 minor injuries. This school bus was a new bus and it was equipped with seatbelts, but none of the occupants were using the seatbelts at the time of the crash. 3 students were ejected or partially ejected out of the motor coach. Again, they did not receive a pre-trip safety briefing, and the occupants didn't know how to get off the bus. Another important safety issue that we encountered in this investigation was by first responders, and they were unable to account for all the passengers on the bus because the passenger manifest from the school was inaccurate and did not contain the full complete names of all the bus occupants. The final investigation I'd like to talk about happened on October 30th, 2018, a little after 7 a.m. The 2015 Thomas-built school bus was traveling in Rochester, Indiana, on its morning route. At this location, the road is a 2-lane highway with a posted speed limit of 55 miles per hour. The school bus was stopped at its designated location to pick up students, and the driver activated the bus red warning lights and stop arm. At this location, an agricultural field is on the east side of the road and a mobile home park is on the west side. 10 students and a parent were waiting for the school bus at the mobile home park on the other side of the road from the bus's pickup stop. A watch for school bus warning sign is posted for southbound traffic about 868 feet before the mobile home park. There is no roadway lighting at this location, and on the day of the crash, conditions were dark, the sky was cloudy, and the roadway was dry. After being signaled by a wave from the school bus driver to cross the roadway, 4 of the students entered the roadway. A Toyota Tacoma pickup truck failed to stop for the school bus and struck the 4 children. According to the vehicle's recorded data, the pickup truck struck the student pedestrians at 41 miles per hour. As a result of the crash, 2 students died and 1 was seriously injured. Our investigation showed that there was no indication that the pickup truck driver experienced any medical issues. She was not using her cell phone and she was not impaired by drugs or alcohol. The safety issues identified in this investigation were related to school bus route planning and stop locations, illegal passing of school buses, and safety technology. The school bus route for the bus involved in this crash required students to cross a 55-mile-per-hour roadway to board the school bus in the dark early morning hours. We learned that the school system relied on its drivers to plan the bus routes and that the routes were not evaluated. Typically, the routes would be planned and passed down as drivers left, and the routes were basically based primarily on transportation needs like expediency. The school system had no system for the tracking of safety-related complaints or their resolutions. A safe school bus route should avoid requiring students to cross high-speed roadways. Creating safe routes that those who develop the routes when creating safe routes, we ask that whoever is planning them be required to have proper training to assess route safety. Moreover, school bus routes should be evaluated periodically for hazards, and when individuals familiar with the route identify hazards, there should be a mechanism by which the dangers can be reported and tracked. And finally, when students must cross a roadway to board a bus, drivers and students must know and use consistent procedures to reduce the risk when crossing. In this case, the school system's transportation director is responsible for student safety and route planning, and school bus drivers are required to obtain a basic training certification by the state of Indiana before they can operate a school bus. The Indiana Department of Education offers a Transportation 101 course. In this course, transportation directors are provided information about the causes and trends of crashes. However, the course contained limited information about risk assessment of routes. The transportation director had not attended the Transportation 101 training course, and this course is not a statutory requirement. And at the time of the crash, we found that less than 2% of all of the transportation directors had actually attended it. We also learned that students were provided training and education by the school bus drivers at the beginning of each semester, and that the training covered conduct, emergency evacuations, and the universal crossing signal. The guidance provided to drivers did not specify that all traffic must be stopped before signaling students to cross, but just that it needed to be controlled. On the day of the crash, when the driver perceived the pickup truck's approach as a hazard to the students, he honked the horn to warn them. Investigators found, however, that neither the students nor the parent on the day of the crash understood what to do when the driver sounded the horn. Even though the children reportedly had the required training, there was no process to ensure the adequacy or the comprehension of that training. We also learned that there was no written policy on when or how to report safety incidents or hazards, and the safety of the route was not adequately evaluated when safety issues were brought to the attention of the school corporation and they were not tracked to resolution. I'm sure that you are likely familiar with the number that NASDIP's released, which is that there's more than 17 million illegal school bus passings occurring every school year. And even though NHTSA and the states have PSAs and educational information about illegal passing of school buses, and that this information is also covered in most state driving manuals for those learning to drive, drivers continue to be unaware of the potential risk of striking a child when they pass a stopped school bus, or they simply are impatient. We know that school bus safety weeks and other targeted safety campaigns, coupled with high visibility enforcement, are an effective strategy for reducing illegal passings. But we also believe that technology can help to address the problem as well. When it comes to illegally passing stopped school buses, stop arm cameras can be a successful deterrent in reducing the number of drivers who illegally pass. The cameras not only allow school districts to report school bus passings to law enforcement, but they also offer an opportunity for data collection that can be used for risk assessment along with risk assessments along the school bus routes. Technology can also be used to prevent collisions with student pedestrians and mitigate injuries. So advanced vehicle technologies that are currently available can assist drivers in avoiding or mitigating crashes with pedestrians and in recognizing stopped school buses. We also support the development of vehicle-to-vehicle technology and that it be applicable to school buses. For example, a technology by which a school bus can trigger the activation of a school bus stop warning sign on the road when the bus is approaching or stopped at a school bus would help alert drivers of other vehicles and could lead to reductions in illegal school bus passings. Although routes that require a student to cross a roadway to board a school bus or to return home after disembarking should be minimized, we recognize there will continue to be some routes where students will have to cross a roadway. In such cases, we believe that technology may help to prevent crashes or mitigate injuries sustained by those students. The NTSB determined that the probable cause of the Rochester crash was the pickup truck driver's failure to stop for the school bus for unknown reasons, and that contributing to the crash was the school corporation's inadequate safety assessment of school bus routes that resulted in the prevalence of bus stops that required student pedestrians to cross a 55-mile-per-hour roadway, increasing the risk of injury during a collision, and the failure to establish a clear policy for bus drivers to follow in determining when it's safe to signal students to cross the roadway. As a result of this investigation, we issued 12 new recommendations and reiterated several others to NHTSA, states, school transportation associations, and law enforcement associations related to vehicle technology, legislation to allow the use of stop arm cameras, and training for transportation directors, drivers, and students. If you'd like to learn more about this crash, our findings and recommendations, our investigative team hosted a webinar, and the recording is available on the NTSB YouTube channel and on our website. And I will turn it back over to Leah.
Thanks. So if you would like to learn more about our investigations that we've talked about today, or any of the other school bus investigations that we've done over the years, you can visit our, which is www.ntsb.gov/school buses. On there, you will also find links to the video that I mentioned earlier, as well as other resources that we've developed for school buses. We have some accident summaries that you can share with your colleagues or with others about lessons we've learned over the years about school bus crashes. Additionally, we have a podcast, which is titled Behind the Scene at NTSB, that Stephanie and I co-host together. And we have recorded a few episodes with our highway investigators and board members specifically about school transportation safety. You can access these episodes on the NTSB Safety Compass blog, which is found on our website, or if you have a favorite podcast platform, you can search for us there, and it can be automatically delivered to you when we release a new episode. But I should note that we also do podcasts on other modes of transportation, not just school buses. Additionally, we are active on all of these digital platforms. So if you'd like to continue to stay updated with us, we have Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, etc. We also have a constant contact listserv that you can subscribe to from our website, and you can self-designate which topics you're interested in and get updates through that channel directly to your email. Finally, this is our contact information. If you'd like to get a hold of us in the future, we have very much enjoyed the opportunity to talk with you today. Of course, we would prefer to be speaking to you in person in Kentucky, which is what we typically do when we're asked to speak to our state conferences for school transportation, but this year has not allowed that. But the next time we are able to come and attend a conference and speak to you directly, we look forward to doing so. And with that, I will open it up for any questions that you might have.